So I'm going to say welcome again to One Heart, One Mind Center for Spiritual Living on this first day in February. I'm Reverend Michelle Ingalls. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So a fun thing happened on the way to the Sunday message. Have you ever had the intention of doing one thing and then it morphs into something else? Well, that's what happened to me. I had a very challenging week. Really, it was perfect for the end of what we just finished, which was the January Back to Basics month, because we talked about, well, let's see, we started with the thing itself, then we moved into the way it works, and what it does, and how to use it, which are all of the basic principles of the science of mind teaching, New Thought in general, that all there is God, we are one with it, and because we are one with it, we share its nature, we use the same creative law, consciously or unconsciously, to build our own lives, to create our own lives, and that we can put these principles into practice through spiritual practices that we teach: meditation, affirmations, spiritual mind treatment, sacred giving, sacred study, and sacred service. That's a big mouthful. We did all of that in 4 weeks. And as I was going through this very challenging week, I realized how much I was using these principles. One day, it was hard for me to even be comfortable in my own skin. Ever have those days? And I was like, every hour, I learned this from Rob, I would set my phone and I would go into prayer. And I would go back into the peace and the love of the divine. And it worked. And I went, oh yeah, that's right, this stuff works. I forgot. So I kept, you know what I mean. So I pulled myself back into it, and I realized that sometimes when we go over a lot of information and a lot of stuff, we need to take a pause. And so I decided that instead of moving on to a whole Sunday message today, that we should discuss these basic principles by doing questions and answers. And I don't know if you got a little card as you came in the door that said, my question is, you don't even need to fill it out, we'll just talk. And I have I can repeat your question or I can give you a mic, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing, we're moving into a month of talking about love. And for me, while I understand that love can be sentimental and soft and warm and fuzzy, in our culture we have also made it possession. Have you ever wanted to possess something that you loved? That's not what we're talking about when we talk about all the colors of love. When I think of love, I think of it as the foundational purpose, impetus, creative force for life itself. It is why all the spiritual principles and practices are in place to move us into a deeper sense of love. Love is the structure and the foundation of the universe, and it's why there is creation to begin with, so that we can express this love in a variety of ways, in more full ways, so that this thing we call the thing itself, God, Spirit, whatever it is, can express itself and feel itself as love throughout all of its creation. So why not take a minute before we move into this grand idea and force of creative love to talk about the basic principles. There was one more thing that I wanted to say before we move into question and answers. I was remembering, as I was thinking about this power of love, that I think everything is built on, this strong, powerful force of creation itself. I was thinking about a moment when I was in my early 20s. I was just a young adult, and I had decided that I really didn't resonate with the teachings of the Catholic Church, although a lot of people do, and that's really wonderful. And we are very inclusive in the way that we look at many paths to God. Both of my sisters are very Catholic, and they are delightfully happy with their spiritual tradition. It didn't work for me, and I recognized that, and I moved away from it. And then after the birth of my first child, I started asking myself again, well, if not this, then what? And so I started going to the Berkeley Psychic Institute. I lived in Berkeley at the time. And I was not really satisfied there either. Psychism, channeling, it's all good and everything, but it didn't work for me either. So one day, I can't even remember what I was doing. I was creating something. I was either sewing or doing flowers, one or the other, because that's what I did at the time. And I got lost in it. And I was in the flow. Ever be in the flow? You stand in the flow. Musicians do it. Artists do it. Athletes do it. You get in the flow. You are moving in this creative force. Time and space stand still. You're in it. And that's where I was. And it hit me all of a sudden. That's it. That is what this thing called God, Spirit, whatever is. It is creativity. It is standing in this flow of love and of expression that is moving through me. It was that epiphany moment when I knew that all there is love. Hello. And that I was a part of it. And anything unlike that was not the truth of my being. Now, of course, I've gone in and out of understanding how this all works, but that's when I really knew that I was onto something here. And it was many years later when I found Science of Mind. But it was the beginning and the eye-opening thing for me that love is more than mere sentimentality. It is more than just romantic love, that it is actually the creative structure and foundation of all that is. And I can be a part of it. And I can use it in my life for good, for myself and others. So, and that's what I want to talk about this month as we move into love. But we move into that place standing on the basic principles and practices that we've talked about all January. So, does anybody have a question, a pondering, a wondering that they would like to talk about? Oh, come on.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'm just getting I don't have that yellow sheet with all of the beliefs, but
Yeah, that's
it
okay.
says, love does not overcome hate and fear by argument or force, but by some subtle power of, and this is where my question comes, transformation, transmutation, sublimation, invisible in its essence but apparent through its act. So could you review for me
Is that Holmes or somebody else?
from Dr. Ernest Holmes,
Yeah.
Science of Mind, in
Okay.
today's weekly.
Yeah.
So those words, transformation, transmutation, sublimation. Could you talk about
Can I
that?
speak to that? Yes. So here's the thing. So love, this power, this force of love, does not push against negativity. It does not push against the misuse of the law. It does not push against anything. It pulls back and includes. It recontextualizes whatever it is. Does that make sense? So while we don't say that negativity is something that we have to overcome, it's something that we need to include in a different perception. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You are.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay, good. From the inside it sounded a little crazy. So there's only one life. We are all a part of it. We are all expressing individually in many different ways. And as a part of our learning experience through this journey in form, we come into contact with all kinds of apparent opposites or seeming opposites. And to be able to have love transmute, transform, include, what was the other word?
Transformation, transmutation, which I do need a little definition, sublimation. I get the invisible in its essence, but apparent through its act. That makes sense to me. Everything you say makes sense, so let the word just come out of you, because it's God talking and I hear him.
So what we're saying is that everything is included within it. And from this higher vision, from this raised vibration of love, anything that looks unlike that is seen from a new perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So while good, let me put it this way. In Ernest Holmes, and I think I said this in a recent week sometime or another, Ernest Holmes' last public address was Sermon by the Sea, which happened at Asilomar in 1959, I believe. And in it he said, show me someone who is for something and against no one, and I'll show you the next Jesus, or blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that's it in a nutshell, really, is we are always for something and against nothing. So we don't push up against what we don't like. We don't push up, that's why it's so difficult in today's political climate to not push up against what we think is inappropriate or wrong. What we have to do is rise above and see it included, and because it has showed up, calling for our attention to see it from the higher view, to see it through the lens of love. And love has no boundaries, it has no opposites. What does it say in the beginning of the Course in Miracles? It says that this course is mandatory, only the time that you take it is up to you, and that that there are only two things, love and fear isn't really real. And that's basically what we're talking about here. We change it because we see it's that it isn't real. We see it's misuse or error thinking. Does that make sense?
So it's teaching that we have perspective, and it's sometimes a subtle perspective change from the viewpoint of love takes away that animosity and opens up a different view.
Well, yes.
So let's pretend somebody was divorced and they were an awful, husband that had affairs, and you had to survive with your children and do the best you could. And you have to see from all different perspectives, and love,
That's a great example. Okay, so say you were in a marriage that was a terrible marriage. The husband cheated. It could be the wife. Doesn't matter. We won't be gender specific. But they cheated. They were not very nice people. They, as in the relationship, they didn't show up. Would pushing against them, would hating them, would making them wrong fix them or you or whatever happened? No. But what would? And what would make you more comfortable? By rising above and knowing who you are. Now, I am not saying that love says we have to be a doormat. Not true. We have to have self-love too. And we have to have boundaries, personal boundaries. That's loving ourselves. We can't help anybody if we don't care for ourselves and take care of ourselves. But saying something is wrong with this person is not going to fix me or make me feel any better. It's the practice of forgiveness. Why do we forgive? For ourselves. We forgive so that we can release ourselves from the bondage of fear or hate or resentment or any of those things which are not really real in the grand scheme of God. Does that make sense? So as we pull back, as we see the truth of our being and the truth of the nature of God, we can move past these things that show up and let them inform us about who we really are. Who am I really? Am I this resentment? No. I'm so much more than that. I stand in the flow of divine love. I am the presence of God. And I don't have to be in bondage by the appearance of error thinking anymore. And that's what love does. Love pulls us back. Love sees the grander picture. Love puts us into a natural state and a natural flow, like I was talking about before. And life moves forward effortlessly. Not always, but for the most part, we have moments and we get to re-examine, because we live in this interesting thing called the human body. And it looks like it's separate from everything, but in reality it's one. Multiplicity from unity. And we're all experiencing and expressing ourselves as best we can for what we know at the moment, and we're always moving forward. That was big. That was big. It was a big question. But I hope that helped. Anybody else? The very first time I did this question and answer thing years ago when I was in Grants Pass, the first thing that somebody asked me is, what do you think about form? It's like, Really? That's the first question you're gonna hit me with?
So
It's
I
fine.
do want to just ask you specifically about sublimation, because I really am not really understanding that word.
What's the definition of sublimation? When we, sublimation is when we, it's not transference. When, yeah, that's what I was, when we take it on, when we
Well, maybe you can speak to it in the future for me.
I will, but I can't really speak to it intelligently right now. I'm gonna need to
That's okay.
rethink that.
Remember my statement last week? This is, you know, I won't say it out loud.
Okay?
There's big-
You
this
can
is-
say it out loud, we
this
don't
is-
care.
This is deep shit. And it's very right. You don't have to-
Sublimation means that well, we'll come back to it. I will have an answer for you next week, how's that?
Well, then I'll have to see it.
Okay, yes, you will. Marcia.
Well, it's interesting, I was reading one of my trash magazines, one of my Hollywood trash magazines.
That's
And it
fine.
was talking about Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis, and I just read this yesterday, and, he left her for a 17-year-old. So it was very traumatic for her, but I love what she said, there was a statement, of course, she passed, a number of years ago. but-
Can you all hear her? She's talking about,
Yeah.
you know what, I could just give you that. I
Okay,
could make
yeah.
this better. Hello, technology and all that.
Just a little Hollywood gossip here. Anyway, but I love what she said, you know, after her husband left her for a 17-year-old, and then she was in the middle of making a movie, when he, you know, announced he wanted to divorce her. But she always told her daughter, she said, I'm so glad I had those years with him. They were wonderful. And so she did this she didn't badmouth him, she just basically said, I would have traded those years for anything. So she focused on the good, and that was really, to me, an example of forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know, in the face of public shame and disappointment
Yeah.
and anger. So that stood out for me. And that to me was kind of an example of love.
She was for something and against nothing.
Right.
She honored the good that had come from this situation and how it propelled her forward, and that she gained so much from that time that she spent with him. Yes, she probably had a broken heart, but she didn't let that stop the flow of the divine love that was moving through her.
Yeah, so that's just a Hollywood example.
I like it. Yeah, and I do, I like it. And it's the, you know, it's the truth. Life happens and things show up. But honestly, when things happen, when we are injured in some way or feel injured from a loss, from whatever, it really generally, not from a death, but from a relationship lost or trouble with a family member, really says more about the other person and calls us to a deeper understanding of who and what we really are. Anybody else? Rob?
You were talking about your life and being born into a Catholic family and going through the various phases of your life as you're finding yourself, and the evolution of your life. And my life was the same way. I was born into an atheist family and went through the same steps, not the same ones, but kind of analogous. Anyway, so obviously the universe is evolving. The universe is everybody's doing this, but where do you think we're headed? What does not the end game particularly? I know it's a continuum, but what do you think things are going to look like? Where do you think we're going?
On planet Earth?
Planet Earth, society, the universe,
Well,
any level you want to take this.
You know what? If all there is love, then where else can we end? I personally believe that anything, here's my little, for what it's worth, the way that I see things working, that creation is an expression of this loving force. Everything that is created is for the full expression of the divine to know itself through and as its creation. And its nature is love. And because its nature is love and we share that creative ability, we can show up however we want. But when we get out of sync with that divine loving nature that is who we are, it will show us. We have this wonderful little thing called the law that will match what's really going on for us. So as a country, as a planet, as an individual, as a group consciousness in Centers for Spiritual Living, or the Catholic Church, or Islam religion, whatever shows up, whatever bubbles up to the surface is what we truly believe. And if it bubbles up and it makes us uncomfortable or we don't like the way it looks, then it's calling our attention to heal it, to bring it into the light of love. So if what we see is suddenly a world that is more intolerant of differences, then we need to look within to see where in me is there something unhealed that is intolerant of different races, different religions, different genders, different everything. And where can I bring that up and be at peace with it and bring it into the light of love? Because I don't know about you, but if something bubbles up in my life, it's calling for my attention, so that I can use it as a navigating tool to say, oh, well, this is where I want to go. You know, I've been reading this book, and I've mentioned it before, it's a great book, called Whatever is in the Way is the Way. And that's what I mean. If it's come up in our life, it wants our attention. You know, we might not think that it comes from us, but it's in our sphere of experience. So there must be something in it for us. So if we're seeing self-care of our planet coming up because the weather patterns are changing and we're not being good stewards, then we better take a look at that. Where in ourselves are we not being good stewards of our own lives, of our neighbors, of our friends, of our family? Where are we here? And isn't the most loving thing we can do to be a good steward of the things we have been entrusted with? It seems to me that whatever rises up is what we need to look at. And I truly believe that everyone, as our what we believe statement or a declaration of principles states, that everyone will be in the realization of God and the realization of love. Eventually, actually, we already are. So let's just wake up, because it's already there. We have challenges ahead of us, but they're not insurmountable. I don't know about you, but my God is big enough. It's big enough. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, Colleen!
So Rob brought up the end game, but sometimes I have to tweak my brain cells to think about the beginning, or if we talk about the thing, it always was. If I think about the grand universe, it always was. I mean, here on this planet, we see such perfection in nature, everything is so orderly, but thinking about the universe and not just the Big Bang, but if this thing, I have a problem with, it just always was, like, we just have to believe what on faith, that God, the thing, always was. That's where I'm like
Yeah, I get it.
I can't quite,
So we live in a linear universe, and we live in a linear world, right?
yes.
We have a beginning, a middle, and an end, whatever. And so what we teach is that the infinite nature, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, beyond time and space, it's really difficult for a human brain to wrap it, to contextualize what that means. Because the only time that I've ever felt even close to that, and I can't say that I have, is when I've been in deep meditation and only in the presence of love, or in a mystical moment, which I've had from time to time, when time stood still, and I could get a glimpse or a grasp of that eternal nature of the divine. But we are in form. You know, I love the story of Adam and Eve and the garden, because I don't believe it's a story about Adam and Eve being thrown out because they had sinned. It says that Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Suddenly they became form. Suddenly we moved into a world of opposites where everything looks linear. We moved into time. We moved into space. And here we are. So while we remember the garden because we are one with it, and we remember experiences of unity and love and the power and presence of the divine, it is almost impossible. I shouldn't even say that word. I don't know how we could live in a state of eternity while we're in form. Does that make sense? I don't know that it's possible. Here's what I do know. I know that because my intuitive knowing, which is within me, because I am one with this greater power and presence that is beyond time and space and beyond linear form, I intuitively know that I will always exist. I will always exist. Not in this body, but I will always exist. There's a security and a knowing in the fact that this journey only gets better, whatever it looks like, that shores me up and moves me through those times when I'm asking and scratching my head, oh my gosh, do I still have to do this? Do I still have to face these challenges that look so daunting? I don't know if that answers your question, does it?
Yeah, no, it's just that whole idea of going back through time, going back through linear, going out into the universe and going back to, you can't get something from nothing, that there was always something, I guess.
Oh, there's no nothing.
Right.
Consciousness is not nothing. It may not be form, but it's not nothing.
I'm just saying though that there always was something, is getting to that point of understanding that we didn't get something from nothing. There was always
Right,
something.
there's always something, and we're doing that every day. Our consciousness creates our lives. We're doing something. You know, I love that creation story that the Word of God or the face of God moved upon the waters. And out of that there was something, but it talks about from the nothingness, from the no-thingness. It doesn't say that there wasn't anything there. Consciousness is always first cause. So where there's always consciousness, even though it was no thing yet. From the nothingness, from the no-thingness came all form and all life. Now I can wrap my head around that. Because I know that consciousness is causal. Consciousness is what's in me that, I mean, honestly, nothing that we experience in form could ever have been if it didn't exist in consciousness first. Any invention, any discovery, anything has to be a thought in consciousness first before it comes into form. So that I can wrap my head around. And you know, before the Big Bang, before whatever it is that happened, there was consciousness, this loving power and presence. I can feel that in my heart, although it's me. And each of us has to decide where we come down on that idea. Hate that. Okay, I heard somebody said they had a question. No? Any more? Going once? Somebody.
I have one, just
All right, Allison.
because that conversation brought it up. Consciousness goes on forever and ever. So,
Never ending.
so what?
Can you give it to her? Because my aunt is hard of hearing.
Sure.
Oh, what's your aunt's name?
Penny.
Hi, Penny. Hi, Penny.
Never used
One
one.
of these. Is this for you?
Yep.
So that just brings to mind. What's the belief from the science of mind? What happens when we cease? Our form ceases. Do they believe in reincarnation?
We believe in the continuity of life. Ernest Holmes did not teach the tradition of reincarnation. However, I don't see why not. I mean, forever and ever expanding. I mean, I can't say one way or the other. And we don't So we don't believe that you go to heaven or hell and there's these places, geographical places that you enter. Everything is a state of consciousness. Heaven is a state of mind. Hell is a state of mind. But we do believe in the continuity of life, forever and ever expanding. And that brings me back to the whole love thing, that no matter what happens here on earth, I mean, and also back to what you said, even the universe's form, consciousness was pre-universe. I mean, it had to be, right? Or what else could it be? There had to be something that came from the no-thingness or the nothingness to move us into this experience. So I talked to my dead father. Am I crazy? Well, maybe. But, you know, I have conversations with him all the time. And I talk to other intelligences or beings outside of time and space, out of form. And, you know, I can't prove that that's what I'm doing, but I know I am. So my personal belief is that yes, we continue. And yes, in some situations from our intuitive knowingness, we can communicate with intelligence that is, I mean, I talk to God. God lives through me. Consciousness is in me. I personally believe that we move on to a greater yet to be, however that may look. Whether that means we come back into a body and have another human experience or some other kind of life, I can't tell you, I don't know. Until we're there, we don't know. And that's basically what Science of Mind teaches. We teach the continuity of life, forever and ever expanding towards a greater experience of love. Does that?
Yes.
Yeah, that gets it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Are we good? All right. I sort of feel incomplete, so because there's so much to say, so maybe we can continue the conversation in the social hall, but let's pray right now. So let's take in a nice deep breath. And I know that all there is God. That is all that exists. It is consciousness. It is formless. It is the no-thingness of life. And we are the at-one-ment with life, or the atonement, which means coming into union with this divine no-thingness. For we are the arms of God right where we are. We are standing in its beingness, for that's all there is. And I know that every person in this room is one with that divine life. It can be no other way. There is no other presence or power. So I speak my word forward about each and every person present in this room, each and every person that is not in this room, all life on our planet, our beloved country. May she rise strong in the presence of love, in the presence of justice and truth, which always wins. For it is all that really exists, so it's the only thing that can be. It's the only place we can rest. So, I accept that shift in consciousness, that flow of the divine grace that moves in and through and around us as our lives for each and every being on this beautiful planet and the planet herself. I know that in every area of our life, this full, creative, juicy edge of God expresses and expands. And I know this at such a deep place that I rest in that. And I give great thanks in that. And I feel comforted in that. And I am strong in that. And I feel that conviction, for I feel as if the thing has happened in full faith. So for this and so much more, I simply say thank you. And I move into that resonance of gratitude which expands all life. And allow it to be. I release this prayer. I let Spirit do Spirit's work. And together we signify our agreement by saying, and so it is.